That.
Everyone, thanks for joining us in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien, and this is registered licensed dietitian nutritionist Shira Hirshberg with All Foods Nutrition. Shira, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. It's so good to see you, and so glad to have you here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Always good to be here.
So it is good for you to be here and for us to be here. So we're talking about something kind of fun today, kind of cool. Barbecues and cookouts, healthier.
Yep.
Options.
Healthier, exactly.
Healthier. I like that. When you sent me the email, you were like, healthier, like in parentheses. So everybody's like going out to barbecues. We're all having cookouts. We're all doing kinds of fun stuff. And something that you try not to do, but you kind of maybe sometimes always overdo, is overeat at these things.
Yep.
Is that a problem?
It's a problem. It's hard because there's so much food laid out, and that sort of situation makes it really hard to eat a reasonable amount of food. And that's one of the reasons we study college students and their difficulties. That's some of the work I did in graduate school because they have the same situation at every single meal.
yeah, right. Dining hall, unlimited,
Right.
all the time.
So that same problem occurs for all people at cookouts. Also, the foods people tend to bring to cookouts don't tend to be the healthiest, right? Tends to be grilling, a lot of burgers, hot dogs, white bread, potato salad, which is like usually loaded with mayonnaise, which isn't an unhealthy thing on its own. It's just the total quantity of fat at these things tends to be really high, and calories. And because it's all sitting out, you just tend to keep going back and eating, and never really often sitting down for a solid meal, which makes it really hard to regulate the amount of food you're eating.
Oh. But we're not spoiling your cookout fun. We're
We're
trying
not.
to just make it a little bit better so you can actually feel better, because you know when you're just like going back over and over again and then you go home and you're just like, oh, I feel terrible. We don't want you to feel terrible. We want you to feel good. Okay,
Exactly.
so what are some ways that we can, we'll start off with this. What are some ways that we can maybe not feel terrible? Maybe some ways that we can not overdo it when we're at the cookout. Maybe just not overeat.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to bring something that will help you do that.
Okay.
So usually people bring something to every cookout, right? And your choice can be fruits and vegetables, which are usually really hard to find at cookouts. Maybe you get like a whole bunch of watermelon, but often there's not a lot of choices. So pick a fruit or vegetable dish that you like and bring that, and then you know that will be available, and you can create that balanced plate by throwing whatever you brought on half of your plate. The other thing I'd recommend is have a solid meal. You know, it's fine to then snack later, but sit down and have a solid meal, because if you don't, you're often not that full, and then you go back for more, and you go back for more, and there's never a point in time in which you feel satisfied, but then that also means there's never a point in time in which you stop eating.
That's true.
So it's good to just pick a time, even if the food will be out for hours. Let's say when most things come out, get a whole plate of food, sit down, eat it like a grown-up instead of like on the run, you know, like we tend to do with small children sometimes. And, you know, enjoy that food. And then certainly you get hungry again, it's fine to go back and eat more, but instead of continually grazing, it's a lot better to sit down and enjoy a full meal.
Okay. And everybody deserves to sit down and have a full meal, right?
Yeah.
Like, parents out there, you can take turns. Everybody just sit down.
Find a friend,
Yeah,
have them watch your kids.
Find a friend. I like that idea. Find a friend. You deserve to sit down, enjoy it. Grandparents out there, you deserve
In a
to.
perfect world, your kids would do the same thing, right? Like they would sit down with you and eat food as well. Maybe they won't take as long, but at least for some period of time, everybody would be sitting down.
I like that. Okay. So some other things that you had mentioned as well is the food is out for a long time.
Right.
So can that be somewhat unhealthy too when you're looking at certain types of food? I mean, it's hot, you know, sometimes it gets to be 90 degrees here.
Yeah, it
Can
can
that be
be
trouble?
a food safety issue.
Okay.
So there are a lot of recommendations out there. If you Google food safety and cookouts, there's like this whole long scrolly list of food safety
I
recommendations.
don't know if I want to.
We don't need to go through all of them, but
No, I
one
would've
thing to
done
keep
that
in
whole.
mind is that if it's really warm out there, 2 hours is really as long as food that, you know, would be a food safety concern should be sitting out. So that's anything cooked, right? You know, it's fine to leave your fruit out longer than that, but anything that's cooked, anything that could grow bacteria, that includes stuff that's mixed with mayonnaise, like your pasta salad with mayo, your potato salad with mayo, really after 2 hours should go in the fridge.
Okay.
And if it's over 90 degrees, the recommendation is 1 hour.
Okay.
Which is quite different, right?
Yeah.
So one of the other things I recommend is to bring something with ice so that you can keep stuff on ice until you cook it off. And that's another way to help manage that.
Oh.
The other thing that is a concern, that's a pretty big one, is cross-contamination. So you bring a plate out, it has the burgers on it, you cook them, you put them back on that same plate, now they have raw meat juice on them, right? So just things to be aware of is that anywhere you can cross-contaminate and get raw meat stuff on anything else, you want to be really careful about those situations.
Okay, so different plates, cross-contamination, put stuff back on ice or back in the fridge,
Right.
and just make a couple trips, because a couple trips will help you burn off all those.
That will help you with your exercise. Do you want to talk about that
Yeah,
next?
sure, why not? Yeah, it help. Those couple extra tips to burn off the goodies. Because that's what we were kind of chatting about, ways to make this fun, make it interesting. Because you go to cookout, sometimes you're at people's houses all day, or you're at the park all day, so maybe you're eating a lot. But what are some ways, that maybe say you have like 4 hot dogs, or like a hot dog and a hamburger because you can't decide. What are some ways, that you can start to burn that off while you're at your family event or your friend event?
So certainly the more activity you do, the better. That's always the case, but it is really hard to make up for serious cookout indulgence with exercise. So if you run for a half an hour at a 10-mile-per-hour pace, which is like a reasonable, not super athletic pace, right? This is what I usually would run at if I'm not
good.
training for something specifically, right? So general pace. You burn about 300 calories, maybe a little bit more. So if you're running after your kids, you're probably not solidly running for 30 minutes at a stretch. You're like a little bit here and a little bit there. So I would recommend trying to manage the food over trying to up the exercise at events like this. Like games like cornhole, you're barely moving, right? You got like the arm toss, like 5 calories here and 5 calories there. So
how many beanbags do you have to toss to work off the hot dog?
So I would recommend using more strategies around managing what you eat, and certainly be active. We always want to try to be active, but not to make up for it with that, because it's just so hard to do. So when we think about other strategies with managing what you eat, I talked about one, right? Have a solid meal, but there's some other ones to keep in mind. After that solid meal, if you're standing around, try not to stand too close to the table with all of the food on it. Because realistically, that just makes it a bit hard for you not to eat. It's easy to mindlessly eat when you're within arm's reach of food. So get at least out of arm's reach, so you physically have to walk over, and that at least is a mental note that I'm choosing to eat more right now, not I just happen to be able to grab chips with my arm.
That totally makes sense. You don't think about it when you're right there, because you're just like, oh, chips.
People tend to gather around the food, so it sounds easy, but it's actually often, you have to think about it a bit. So that's one of them to keep in mind also.
Start the trend of going over by something else.
Yep, just pick another spot, and most people are very understanding of that. You can actually say, I don't really want to stare near the food, because if I do, I'm going to keep eating chips and I'm not actually hungry. Most people are like, you're right, I don't also want to be eating chips this whole time. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
I like that thought. Okay, that's good. Everybody mark that down, mental note. I like that idea. Okay, and so, chasing your kids around feels like a lot, but it might not be that much work. But sometimes, like, I've gone to cookouts and barbecues and stuff, there's a game of volleyball going on. Right. So maybe just even, like, if you're setting something like that up, that can help, right?
Trying to include the more activities, the better. And also it keeps people having fun. People are happy when they're exercising. So it'll also keep your crowd happy.
I like that idea. Let's talk a little bit about, because you're really good at this, offering suggestions for maybe eat this, not that. So a lot of times with cookouts, it's a lot of heavy on the meat options and the buns, like you said, the white stuff that might not necessarily be the most nutritious stuff. So when you're going to a cookout and maybe you are planning it yourself, or you are bringing something, what are some stuff that's normally there and some options that you could do instead?
Great. So there are a lot of good, healthier swaps you can make. So I'm going to refer, because I've got some numbers for you guys here today. So if you choose grilled chicken instead of a burger, you save 50 calories and 3 grams of saturated fat in a 4-ounce portion, which often people are eating more than that, right? 4 ounces.
4 ounces. That's
about the
really
size
small.
of my palm. Yeah.
Oh.
I have about a 4-ounce palm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wait, your hand. I was like, your hand. No, that's pretty big, but your palm. Okay.
Yeah, a tiny lady has about a 3-ounce palm. I'm not tiny. I'm 5'10", so mine's about a 4-ounce palm. Some really big guys might have a 5 or even a 6-ounce palm.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's even in that 4-ounce portion, you save that much. Some other ones, some whole wheat buns instead of white buns. save 10 calories, and you get 3 times the fiber.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so that'll also help you stay full from the fiber. Light beer for regular beer saves you 50 calories. And if you leave the skins on potatoes and potato salad, you get some extra vitamins and minerals in that. So those are a few kind of quick and easy swaps. Also, condiments bring a lot. So if we think our traditional barbecue ones are barbecue sauce and ketchup, right? So you can choose some different products that have a little bit better nutritional profile. So Annie's Naturals makes some good ones. And I have, let's see, some numbers for those. So 35 calories per 2 tablespoons is the Annie's Naturals barbecue sauce. And if you go for Heinz, it's a little bit more, 40 calories. But if you go for a Sweet Baby Ray's, now we're talking 70 calories in that same amount. There's another really good one actually that comes from my college hometown of Syracuse. So
Ooh.
This one's fun. Dinosaur barbecue.
Oh, it's so good.
Slathering sauce
So
is 25 calories per 2 tablespoons.
That's
So
not bad.
that's actually your latest option that I could find on a quick look. So there are some better options. Ketchup. Annie's also makes 12 calorie per tablespoon ketchup compared to 20 in a typical kind of Heinz option. So there, check your labels on your condiments. You'll be surprised what you find.
I mean, just the sugar in all those is
Yeah.
so. I mean, you don't even know until you start looking.
They are basically sugar.
Which is why it tastes good, I guess. Right?
Yep, absolutely. That's why my daughter will literally eat ketchup with a spoon.
I found out my niece does that too. I think it's just like the 2-year-old, right?
Why wouldn't you? It's pure sugar.
Awesome. So as you look to make swaps, I found out there's all kinds of cool things that you can grill. I was just like looking at healthier options. Someone was saying they grilled plums. They grilled kale.
Yeah, fruit is very good. Grilled peaches are delicious. Some people grill pineapple, also very good. And of course, you've got your hot dog hamburgers, your traditional. But of course, like I said, grilled chicken's one. There's also like a turkey burger. There's a lot of other things out there. Veggie burgers, they're not just for vegetarians. So there's definitely other things you can throw on there. Grilled vegetables are delicious. Eggplant, so there's lots of good options. Zucchini is really going to be in season very soon.
So when we're looking at, when it comes to the grill, I kind of mentioned this to you, we're hearing about carcinogens. Do we really need to worry about that a ton if we're just going to cookouts every now and then?
It's like once a week, like many.
Or if it's like, if we're all grill every day, all summer. What are your thoughts when it comes to carcinogens and we're consuming grilled meats or grilled vegetables?
So I'm also going to refer to a few notes for this one because these words are long.
Okay.
So the concern with grilling meats is in 2 compounds. And so those are called heterocyclic amines, HCAs for short, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs. See, even I'm struggling. And they're basically formed when meat, including fish, pork, poultry, anything, is cooked at a high temperature. And so that includes grilling, but it also includes other methods. So that's one of the ways. The thing that's a little tricky about this is we don't have a federal guideline. There's no federal recommendation for how much of this stuff you should be consuming. The best guideline we have is actually from the World Cancer Research Fund, the American Institute for Cancer Research. So those 2 organizations issued a report with dietary guidelines. They recommend limiting the consumption of red and processed, including smoked meats, but they don't have any level for the amount of those things. But certainly people who are concerned, people have a risk, family history of cancer, that's one way you can reduce your risk is by limiting these things. We don't have a lot of studies in humans, we've got animal studies, they give us pretty good data about this, that's where a lot of our concern comes from. And then also we've epidemiological studies, but it's a little bit hard to do a randomized controlled trial on grilled meat. So some things that you can do to reduce your exposure: you can avoid direct exposure of meat to an open flame or hot metal surface, avoid prolonged cooking times, especially at hot temperatures. That can reduce the formation of those compounds that are dangerous. You can actually use a microwave oven to cook meat before you grill it. That can reduce the formation because then it's not at that high heat as long.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Continually turning it helps produce less of those compounds, and removing the charred portions of meat, because that's kind of some evidence of those compounds, can help. So that can help you reduce. and not using gravy made from meat drippings.
Oh.
So those are some of the ways to reduce your exposure if you're really intent on having those foods.
Okay, so reduce your risk. I mean, why take a chance, right? If you can minimize risk in any way possible, why not?
Yep.
This has been really fun. I mean, we're all, you gotta love those little get-togethers, right?
Absolutely.
Especially when in winter we have this 17,000 feet of snow.
It's a great chance to be outside, be with people you love, and it's fine to eat unhealthful food sometimes, right? It's just that if you're doing this every single weekend, you want to think about how you're doing it and find ways to do it in a healthier way than maybe you're doing right now.
And you're the expert, so I always like to take your advice. Shira Hirshberg with All Foods Nutrition, licensed registered dietitian nutritionist. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to get set up for our next guest. That was Shira Hirshberg with All Foods Nutrition. You can follow her there, and she comes and hangs out with us on